I'm going to tell you the easiest way to write up your literature review within your thesis proposal for a PhD or even a master's program. And this is going to really, really help you out. So I'm walking the dogs right now, Izzy and Babs. And I was just thinking about that. One thing that I haven't covered that much is how to actually do this. And so the biggest thing that you have to think about is that you're always talking about your dependent variable, the thing that you want to explain. And so you have to figure out what is that particular phenomenon that you're trying to explain. And the idea is to tell a story about that dependent variable and the thing that you're trying to explain, whether it's being a parent, or maybe it is running a company, whether it's what kind of t-shirts people wear, whatever, right? Like, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you're explaining that particular thing. So the idea is to look up all of the stories, what are the theories of people talking about in terms of explaining that particular dependent variable. And then once you describe those stories, or you describe your dependent variable in the beginning, right? You describe the thing that you're actually talking about in the beginning. Then you get into those stories, the theories that people have talked about. And it might be one particular theory or two particular theories, but not too many more than that. It gets a little overwhelming when you do that. So one or two is always the best way to think about it. And then you jump into the thing that you're using to explain that particular phenomenon, right? So the independent variable to explain that phenomenon, or the construct that's going to explain that phenomenon that nobody else has done before. And then that's where you identify your research gap. At that point, is thinking about what somebody hasn't done before and explained before within that particular theory. And then you talk about that independent variable, and then you jump into the relationships of that independent variable in terms of how people have talked about it before and told those stories from the theory that people have talked about before. And that's really it. You're really thinking about telling stories along the way, and thinking about, as the reader, as somebody that's actually reading this particular thing, what is interesting, what hasn't been said and done before. It's going to take you a lot of revisions and trial and error, but that's what you should be thinking about, is what is the thing I'm interested in? What is that particular thing? And then how do I explain that thing given what people have said before? And if nobody has said anything, which I really highly doubt it, once you start taking a dive into it, you'll realize that lots of people have talked about those particular things. Then you can start doing qualitative research to explain what's going on. But I'd highly actually recommend for you to do that before you start going into doing too much of explaining a big grand theory. It's actually just go talk to people. And you don't have to obviously you want to get ethics, IRB approval, institutional review board approval is what it's called in the United States, but ethics approval first. But you just want to go talk to people and see what they think about the particular phenomenon. And you know what? You can talk to friends and family. You can talk to all sorts of people to figure out, what is this thing? Often you might talk to people that you know first and then jump into it. And the idea is to try to figure out what is interesting. What is it that people really talk about and are interested about? And then look at the phenomenon in the newspaper. How do people talk about it within the news and the press? And thinking about, what are they actually saying? Are they missing the point on something? Once you get that down in terms of explaining, maybe it is the number of children that are on the streets, for example. Once you get that down and you realize not too many people have talked about it in this particular way, which is always the way, always the case. There's always some sort of angle that you can look at and you're like, wait a minute, nobody's talked about that. Then write it up in that sort of way. And so the goal is to really get an in-depth understanding of the thing that you're trying to explain, that dependent variable, that construct, and then figure out what it is, the stories that people have told, the theories that people have told to explain that particular phenomenon. As you do this, you'll begin to realize that there is a ton of stuff to always research. And don't be afraid if you find somebody that has already done this before. That's actually a good thing, because you're building on it, right? So if it's been done to death, and lots of people have done it, just start looking at how they've done it. What kind of methods have they looked at? What is the, are there results that are inconsistent? All of that stuff, once you start taking a deep dive into it, it suggests that there's always more to be done. And as soon as so for example, maybe everybody has done quantitative metrics to study a particular phenomenon. Well, as soon as you do qualitative stuff, you realize, oh my gosh, they really got it wrong. And that's the idea. You're telling stories. It's a narrative. The whole thing is always a narrative. You're always telling the story about why this is interesting. Why are you paying attention to this? Why does it actually matter to the group of people that you're actually writing to? So in a way, you're kind of a writer. You're kind of somebody that is telling stories. You're a bit of a journalist, a bit of a scientist. You're a bit of a, telling elementary school stories. But that's the goal, is you just keep writing it up and iterating and going through it until you get that research gap, until you find the story that you would love to tell. And then you will get there, and do it piece by piece every single day. Keep writing a little bit on there and it will get done. Trust me, it does every single time. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.